Who is Alex Haley? Alexander Murray Palmer Haley, born August 11, 1921, and died February 10, 1992, was an American writer and the author of the 1976 book Roots, the Saga of an American Family. ABC adapted the book as a television miniseries of the same name and aired it in 1977 to a record-breaking audience of 130 million viewers. In the United States, the book and miniseries raised the public awareness of Black American history and inspired a broad interest in genealogy and family history. Haley's first book was the autobiography of Malcolm X, published in 1965, a collaboration through numerous lengthy interviews with Malcolm X. I have a copy of this book and am willing to read it if interested, so comment down below and I can get started. He was working on a second family history novel at his death. Haley had requested that David Stevens, a screenwriter, complete it. The book was published as Queen, the Story of an American Family. It was adapted as a miniseries, Alex Haley's Queen, broadcast in 1993. Alex Haley was born in Ithaca, New York on August 11, 1921, and was the eldest of 3 brothers, the other 2 being George and Julius, and a half-sister from his father's second marriage. Haley lived with his family in Henning, Tennessee, before returning to Ithaca with his family when he was 5 years old. Haley's father was Simon Haley, a professor of agriculture at Alabama A&M University, and his mother was Bertha George Haley, née Palmer, who had grown up in Henning. The family had Mandinka, other African, Cherokee, Scottish, and Scottish-Irish roots. The younger Haley always spoke proudly of his father and the obstacles of racism he had overcome. Like his father, Alex Haley was enrolled at Elkhorn State University, a historically black college in Mississippi, and, a year later, enrolled at Elizabeth City State College, also historically black, in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. The following year, he withdrew from college. His father felt that Alex needed discipline and growth, and convinced him to enlist in the military. On May 24, 1939, Alex Haley began what became a 20-year career in the United States Coast Guard. Haley traced back his maternal ancestry through genealogical research to Jafurah in the Gambia. Haley enlisted as a mess attendant. Later he was promoted to the rate of Petty Officer 3rd Class in the rating of Steward, one of the few ratings open to blacks at that time. It was during his service in the Pacific Theater of Operations that Haley taught himself the craft of writing stories. During his enlistment, other sailors often paid him to write love letters to their girlfriends. He said that the greatest enemy he and his crew faced during their long voyages was not the Japanese forces, but rather boredom. After World War II, Haley petitioned the U.S. Coast Guard to allow him to transfer into the field of journalism. By 1949, he had become a Petty Officer 1st Class in the rating of a journalist. He later advanced to Chief Petty Officer and held his rank until his retirement from the Coast Guard in 1959. He was the first chief journalist in the Coast Guard, the rating having been expressly created for him in recognition of his literary ability. Haley's awards and decorations from the Coast Guard include the Coast Guard Good Conduct Medal, with 1 silver and 1 bronze service star, American Defense Service Medal with C clasp, American Campaign Medal, Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal, European African Middle Eastern Campaign Medal, World War II Victory Medal, Korean Service Medal, National Defense Service Medal, United Nations Service Medal, and the Coast Guard Expert Marksmanship Medal. The Republic of Korea awarded him the War Service Medal 10 years after he died. The United States Coast Guard dedicated the cutter formerly known as USS Adenton to Haley by recommissioning it as USCGC Alex Haley in July 1999. The cutter currently serves from Kodiak, Alaska. Haley conducted the first interview for Playboy magazine. Haley elicited candid comments from jazz musician Miles Davis about his thoughts and feelings on racism in an interview he had started but not finished for Show Business Illustrated, another magazine created by Playboy founder Hugh Hefner that folded in early 1962. Haley completed the interview, and it appeared in Playboy's September 1962 issue. That interview set the tone for what became a significant feature of the magazine. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.'s Playboy interview with Haley was the longest he ever granted to any publication. Throughout the 1960s, Haley was responsible for some of the magazine's most notable interviews, including one with George Lincoln Rockwell, leader of the American Nazi Party. He agreed to meet with Haley only after gaining assurance from the writer that he was not Jewish. Haley remained professional during the interview, although Rockwell kept a handgun on the table throughout it. The interview was recreated in Roots: The Next Generations, with James Earl Jones as Haley and Marlon Brando as Rockwell. Haley also interviewed Muhammad Ali, who spoke about changing his name from Cassius Clay. Other interviews include Jack Ruby's defense attorney Melville Belly, entertainer Sammy Davis Jr., football player Jim Brown, TV host Johnny Carson, and music producer Quincy Jones. The autobiography of Malcolm X, published in 1965, was Haley's first book. It describes the trajectory of Malcolm X's life, from street criminal to national spokesman for the Nation of Islam, to the conversion of Sunni Islam. It also outlines Malcolm X's philosophy of Black pride, Black nationalism, and Pan-Africanism. Haley wrote an epilogue to the book summarizing the end of Malcolm X's life, including his assassination in New York's Audubon Ballroom. Haley ghostwrote the autobiography of Malcolm X based on more than 50 in-depth interviews he conducted with Malcolm X between 1963 and Malcolm X's February 1965 assassination. The two men had first met in 1960 when Haley wrote an article about the Nation of Islam for Reader's Digest. They met again when Haley interviewed Malcolm X for Playboy. The initial interviews for the autobiography frustrated Haley. Rather than discussing his own life, Malcolm X spoke about Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the Nation of Islam. He became angry about Haley's reminders that the book was supposed to be about Malcolm X. After several meetings, Haley asked Malcolm X to tell him something about his mother. That question drew Malcolm X into recounting his life story. The autobiography of Malcolm X has been a consistent bestseller since its 1965 publication. The New York Times reported that 6 million copies of the book had sold by 1977. In 1998, Time ranked the autobiography of Malcolm X as one of the 10 most influential nonfiction books of the 20th century. In 1966, Haley received the Anisfield Wolf Book Award for the autobiography of Malcolm X. In 1973, Haley wrote his only screenplay, Superfly TNT. The film starred and was directed by Ron O'Neal. In 1976, Haley published Roots: The Saga of an American Family, a novel based on his family's history going back to slavery days. It started with the story of Kunta Kinte, who was kidnapped in the Gambia in 1767 and transported to the province of Maryland to be sold as a slave. Haley claimed to be a 7th-generation descendant of Kunta Kinte, and his work on the novel involved 12 years of research, intercontinental travel, and writing. He went to the village of Jafur, where Kunta Kinte grew up and listened to a tribal historian, a griot, tell the story of Kinte's capture. Haley also traced the records of the ship, the Lord Legionnaire, which he said carried his ancestor to the Americas. Haley stated that the most emotional moment of his life occurred on September 29, 1967, when he stood at the site of Annapolis, Maryland, where his ancestor had arrived from Africa in chains exactly 200 years before. A memorial depicting Haley reading a story to young children gathered at his feet has since been erected in the center of Annapolis. Roots was eventually published in 37 languages. Haley won a special Pulitzer Prize for the work in 1977. The same year, Roots was adapted as a popular television miniseries of the same name by ABC. The serial reached a record-breaking 130 million viewers. Roots emphasized that Black Americans have a long history, and that not all of that history is necessarily lost, as many believed. Its popularity also sparked a greatly increased public interest in genealogy. In 1979, ABC aired the sequel miniseries Roots: The Next Generations, which continued the story of Kunta Kinte's descendants. It concluded with Haley's travel to Darfur. Haley was portrayed at different ages by Christophe St. John, the Jeffersons actor Damon Evans, and Tony Award winner James Earl Jones. In 2016, History aired a remake of the original miniseries. Haley appeared briefly, portrayed by Tony Award winner Lawrence Fishburne. Haley was briefly a writer-in-residence at Hamilton College in Clinton, New York, where he began work on Roots. He enjoyed spending time at a local bistro called the Savoy in nearby Rome, where he would sometimes pass the time listening to the piano player. Today, there is a special table in honor of Haley at the Savoy, and a painting of Haley writing Roots on a yellow legal tablet. Early in the 1980s, Haley worked with the Walt Disney Company to develop an Equatorial Africa pavilion for its Epcot Center theme park. Haley appeared on a CBS broadcast of Epcot Center's opening day celebration, discussing the plans and exhibiting concept art with host Danny Kaye. Ultimately, the pavilion was not built due to political and financial issues. Late in the 1970s, Haley had begun working on a second historical novel based on another branch of his family, traced through his grandmother, Queen. She was the daughter of a black slave woman and her white master. He did not finish the novel before dying in Seattle, Washington, of a heart attack on February 10, 1992. He was buried beside his childhood home in Henning, Tennessee. At his request, the novel was finished by David Stevens and was published as Alex Haley's Queen. It was subsequently adapted as a miniseries of the same name in 1993. Late in Haley's life, he had acquired a small farm in Clinton, Tennessee, although at the time it had a Norris, Tennessee address. The farm is a few miles from the Museum of Appalachia, and Haley lived there until his death. After he died, the property was sold to the Children's Defense Fund, which calls it the Alex Haley Farm. The nonprofit organization uses the farm as a national training center and a retreat site. An abandoned barn on the farm property was rebuilt as a traditional barn, using a design by architect Maya Lin. The building now serves as a library for the CDF. The University of Tennessee Libraries in Knoxville, Tennessee, maintains a collection of Alex Haley's personal works in its Special Collections Department. The works contain notes, outlines, bibliographies, research, and legal papers documenting Haley's roots through 1977. Of particular interest are the items showing Harold Corlander's lawsuit against Haley, Doubleday and Company, and various affiliated groups. Portions of Haley's personal collection is also located at the African American Research Library and Cultural Center's Special Collections and Archives in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The Keeper of the Word Foundation in Detroit, Michigan maintains Alex Haley's Coast Guard notes, writings, and love letter notes that developed Haley's writings. Along with a digital unpublished autobiography of Malcolm X and epilogue, omitted introduction and chapters, outline, letters, handwritten notes, Haley's complete interviews of Malcolm X's, poetry, and edited notes and digital rights. In the City Dock section of Annapolis, Maryland, there is a memorial to mark the arrival location of Kunta Kinte in 1767. The monument, dedicated on June 12, 2002, also celebrates the preservation of African American heritage and family history.